Okay. We will get going. And we are recording, so thank you, everybody. Welcome. Kathy and I are tag teaming tonight. She's learning how to run the program, so if there's technical difficulties, we'll try to work them out as we go, but I think she's got the hang of it. First up, we have a speaker change tonight. Our speaker, Noah, emailed me like half an hour ago that he's sick. He was hoping to be able to push through it and make it through tonight, but he just, he can't do it. So he found us a substitute. So we do have a speaker, but it's not on mirrorless cameras tonight, although we can talk about that a little bit. And we'll see if we can get Noah later on this year. Alaska Wild, why don't we just jump in with that? Gail, you want to run with that?
Yeah. So Alaska Wild will open for submissions on December 15th. And it's open, I think, until January 20th or thereabouts. We will be posting the submission rules this week on the website. We wanted to have it done before this meeting, but I have to set up a meeting with Tara, and we're working around my schedule and her baby's schedule. So we have that meeting set up tomorrow afternoon. So once I'm finished talking with her, hopefully I'll be able to update everything else that I need to update, and I'll get the submission rules to Alan, and he can post them on the website. Couple of changes that the board voted on last January during our retreat. We are changing from 3 jurors to 1 juror, and I think we're going to try to keep it from out of state, right? Bring somebody in from out of state.
That's the goal. Not a hard and fast rule, but get some different judges.
Yeah. And we do have a juror set up for this year, and once we get a bio and get the contract and everything signed, we'll post who that is, and we'll post his bio. The other major change is that instead of a year-long show, 12 months, we are knocking it down to 6 months. So it'll open in April and close at the end of September. So those are the big changes. I forget anything, Margaret?
No, those are the major ones. The same categories are the same, prizes are the same, entry fees the same. And I think we have a good juror. Somebody, it's a friend. I will get that information as soon as I can.
All right.
Workshops, Kathy?
The workshop committee met the other day, and Noah just sent me a list of a ton of workshops that they're doing virtually this year. And some of them are free and some of them are paid because of the professional photographers that are teaching them. And so if there's any particular interest in something that you guys would like to learn, we haven't had a chance to talk to Noah. I just got those in today, and I just haven't had a chance to look at them. But if there's something that you're really interested in, shoot me an email, and I will do my best to pick out some of the ones. I mean, there's enough to do workshops for 10 years. So if we could narrow it down a little bit about things that people would like to learn or are interested in doing Zoom workshops. And also, for those of you who were booked to go to Bear Camp, the dates have been changed to May 28th, 29th, and 30th. And there's quite a few people that aren't going to be able to make it. And so I've got spaces available, and I will be posting that soon. But the Bear Camp is definitely on this year. Last year they had 60 bears in camp over that time frame. So we moved the dates up to see if we can get the most bang for our buck. And he's giving us the discount plus 2 years ago rates, which is pretty phenomenal in this day and age. So anyway, the dates for Bear Camp have been changed to May 28th, 29th, and 30th. And if anybody's interested in going to Bear Camp, let me know, because I think we had quite a few people that canceled. So that's all that I have to report. But I did want to just say one thing, a little bit about housekeeping. If you have a question that you would like to ask any of us, if you would just go down into the chat and raise your hand, then I will field those in order of which they come in. So you don't need to ask the questions in the chat, just raise your hand and you can ask the questions yourself. Okay?
When we get to the talk. Couple more things. Alan, website changes?
Yes,
Still-
there were a few different website changes. The old Viewfinders page has been named newsletters, and the
That's what we
blog.
need to talk about.
Pardon?
We haven't made that announcement. We should do that. So we were talking at the board meeting. We've been having a whole lot of trouble the last at least 5 years, if not longer, getting people to take over and run the Viewfinder newsletter that supposed to come out monthly, and getting people to submit content. So, and Roxanne's had a horrible time with learning programs and not having programs that worked with her computer platform. So we decided that we are going to stop putting out a magazine called the Viewfinder, and instead we are renaming our blog the Viewfinder. We're still going to put content out, but we're going to put it in blog format so we don't have to format a monthly newsletter. Hopefully that will encourage people to give articles or pictures or whatever on a more regular basis, and whoever's in charge doesn't have to have a huge project of putting it all together and begging people to submit information and stories. So that leads into Alan with the website changes. Sorry, Alan, go
Yeah,
ahead.
that was basically the main change. Was the blog has been renamed Viewfinder, and the old Viewfinders page that had basically a list of older newsletters has been called just simply newsletters. Other than that, you'll probably see a few other minor changes. Some of the videos that were on the website were moved to YouTube just to keep them off the website. They're still linked to some of the other 3 meetings that we had earlier this year. So they're still there. It's just the videos are actually embedded in the blog post instead of a link to the video itself. So just other than that, just some minor cleanup on the website for the most part. And as Gail mentioned, I'll have the Alaska Wild submission rules posted when she gets them to me. So that's it. And I've got
Okay.
12 member slides to show tonight.
Okay, awesome. I have one more quick thing. I'm due to have back surgery in 2 weeks from today. So I just want people to know we're moving the board retreat to the February instead of January so that I will be able to attend and run the meeting. So if anybody's watching for the board retreat in January, anybody's welcome to attend. It's going to be on Zoom this year. It's going to be in February, and we'll have a regular board meeting in January. With that, I am going to turn it over to our speaker, John Gregor. He's last minute, like 30 minutes ago, pinch hitter for NOAA. So he has a program that he can do on the spur of the moment on black and white landscape photography. We can talk about mirrorless cameras to some extent. He shoots mirrorless, some of us shoot mirrorless, and we will see if we can get NOAA here possibly in February if he's available, since we're looking for a speaker to do the mirrorless presentation, because I know there are people who are interested in that. So John, thank you for filling in, and I will let you take it away.
Thank you. Yeah. Boy, it's an incredible world we live in, isn't it? 30 minutes ago, I'm looking at Howell's book on birding destinations in Mexico because I'm preparing for a trip down there. And the next thing I know, I'm presenting to a group in Anchorage, Alaska. So it's quite a gear shift here for me. But I want to thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present to your group. I'm a professional photographer. I've been doing photography for most of my life and earning my living from it for most of my life as well. I have shot just a wide variety of things, but mostly location work. I'm never have been a big one in a studio. It's always been location and outdoors. I run a company which you guys might get a kick out of. It's called Cold Snap Photography, and it's based in northern Minnesota. And I've been running Cold Snap Photography for about 25 years now. I do workshops. I offer workshops. You can go to coldsnap.com. I'm sorry, coldsnapphotography.com and see the workshops that I offer around the United States and down in Mexico, although I don't have any listed for Mexico right now. But you can see my work, my fine art work at johngregorphotography.com. That's the other website. You can also follow me on any of the social media if you just look up John Gregor, as well as YouTube. I am going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. So let's see. Why don't I see?
Is it not sharing?
It's not showing, but let me try hitting it again. I'll go here. A second, bear with me a second.
Technology.
Yeah.
Kathy, did you make it so multiple participants can share?
I did.
Okay.
Yep. I'm getting there.
Okay.
All right.
There we go.
And now. All right. Do we see a single slide?
Yes.
All right. Great. So I'm going to talk about the fine art of black and white in landscape. And I'm going to talk about seeing in black and white terms and what I look for and what I look at for black and white photography. We're starting out with a slide that's shot not far from where I'm at. I'm down in Utah. I kind of travel around. I split my time between Utah, Minnesota, and Mexico, with some stops in between. So we'll talk about the visualization, talk about exposure and processing, post-processing, and then we'll talk a little bit about print and presentation. I'll start with a quote from one of my favorite photographers and one of my heroes, a guy by the name of Ansel Adams. I'm sure you're familiar with his work and his approach. And this is taken from his book called The Making of 40 Photographs, published in 1976. And I find that Ansel's work and his writing is still relevant today, even though our processes are very, very different. His philosophical approach to image making is still very, very much germane. And you want some good reading, this is, I think, one of the best books that he published, which is The Making of 40 Photographs, where he tells the story behind the photograph and how he visualized it and how he decided to use the processes that he did. Of course, with digital, those processes are very different, but there's still the philosophical approach behind it. I'm going to show you a little body of work here that just gives you an idea of the kind of work that I do. We're coming in cold. You're getting to know me a little bit and I'm getting to know you. So I'm going to just run through some of the images that I shoot and have done. That last one was from North Dakota. I do a couple workshops out in North Dakota. It's a great place to go photograph abandoned buildings. This is from Iceland. This is from the North Shore of Minnesota, where I'm based along Lake Superior. Another one from the North Shore of Lake Superior. This one's from Utah, down here in this little town where I spend my time, called Bluff, and the locals call that tree the hanging tree. I don't know if it was ever used as its namesake, but it's got a lot of character. I love photographing that tree. It looks different from every angle that you photograph it from. I love the landscape down here. I love the ruins. I love the rock art. It's been a fascinating place to kind of explore. These are some of the local ruins. These date back about 800-900 years. Valley of the Gods, which is also nearby here. This is from Mexico. Blanking on the name of this ruin. It's near a little town called Quetzaltlan, up in the mountains in north central Mexico. This is Cantona. It's was a very extensive ruin that this culture took over when the Aztecs were defeated. The major influence in the area became Cantona, 1,200 acres of ruins all around. Another Valley of the Gods. This is California, in the mountains just east of San Diego. Another one from Bluff area. San Juan River Valley with Valley of, Monument Valley in the distance there. So there's a number of different components that I look for when I'm making a black and white photograph, and the reasoning behind making the photograph. I try to visualize, I try to pre-visualize, like Ansel Adams, the work that I do before I create it. So I'm thinking in terms, frequently when I see the scene, I'm thinking in terms of whether I want to capture it in color or black and white. Of course, I am surprised. Sometimes I think that a scene is going to work out really well in black and white, and it's better in color, and vice versa. But for the most part, I try to anticipate what it is that I want to do with this image before I even trip the shutter. Is this a black and white image, or is this a color image? One of the things that really pops for me for that decision process is the sky. You'll see a lot of very prominent skies in the landscape work that I do, and I filter extensively in camera. And I do that for a variety of different reasons. One of the reasons that I do that is because in film days, I go back to 4x5. I worked with a 4x5 extensively out in the field. I like to fiddle around with a camera when I'm out in the field. I like that process. I like just messing around with a camera and going through those steps. And the filtration, using filters on camera, allows me that sort of that time to work with the camera. It settles me down, gets me thinking about the image that I'm making and how I want it to look beforehand. So I'm sculpting the image towards this final view that I have by starting with the process as I'm creating and making it. So I'm using a lot of graduated neutral density filters. The particular brand that I use is called Benro, and they have up to 5-stop graduated neutral density. I find that when I'm shooting black and white, I tend to use the heavier filters. I really want to darken those skies down, and you can see this one in particular, which has a very dark area in the sky at the top. I want to bring those skies down so that they're getting towards that real nice, deep, dark black. In the old days in film, Ansel Adams and the other large format film photographers used to use a technique where they would use the shift on the lens. And as you shifted the lens, you got towards the fall off area where the lens didn't cover as well and it fell off, i.e. it would darken. So they would shift the lens up so that it was sort of out of the coverage area of the lens, so that it had less, it was passing less light, hence you get the darker skies. To emulate that in digital form, I'm using the graduated neutral density filters. This is another one from Monument Valley. Back to Bluff again with the hanging tree, that same tree you saw. It looks very different every time I photograph it, depending on what angle I'm shooting it from. But again, this has got a combination of a 4 and 5 stop soft graduated neutral density filter applied on the camera as I'm shooting it. And when I'm applying those filters, I don't put them down in the holder too far. One of the problems that I see a lot of beginning photographers make when they're working with filters for the first time is they tend to slam them into the holder a little bit too far. And what happens is you end up with your gradation down in the area of the image that you don't want to be affected. You only want it up by the top area, not way down into your foreground. So I feather those neutral density filters back quite a bit so that they're only affecting the more top area. So it sounds like I'm applying a lot. When I say, well, I'm stacking, I'll stack up to 3 graduated neutral density filters. I'll put the 5 stop on, I'll put the 3 stop or the 4 stop on, and sometimes I'll even put the 3 stop on. But I'm not getting the full effect of that stop of each one. So the 5 stop might be, might only be using, say, 2 or 3 stops of that. The 4 stop, I'm only using maybe 2 stops of it. So it isn't as much as what you might think, but it keeps that gradation up towards the top. It's out on the West Coast, Oregon. So one of the other components I look at, or one of the other things that I look at that makes me think in terms of black and white, is the quality of the light. With black and white photography, light is everything. The quality of that light, what it's doing, and how it's reacting with whatever the subject is, makes a difference on whether it's going to be a good black and white or not. And in this case, certainly caught in this wonderful little sun shower. This is in a town called Puebla, Mexico, in the central area just south of Mexico City. Wonderful town. And this was a great moment. And I shoot Fuji mirrorless cameras, as Margaret had mentioned. I shoot Fuji a lot. This particular image was made with my little pocket camera. It's an X70, and I will carry those when I do travel photography a lot. It's a full APS size sensor, which is the same sensor, basically the same sensor, same processor. That one's a little bit older. I have an X100F, which has got the newer sensor in there. But they're the same basic stuff as what you have on the XT series. So either XT2 or XT3 series of camera, and they hold up really well to enlargements. I've done 20 by 30s off of these little pocket cameras, and they work perfectly well. But light is one of those qualities that I look for. And here's another one. This was actually done with that little X72 twilight shot handheld. There's no IS with this particular camera, but the camera is so small and so lightweight, you can hand hold it really well. This was shot at 1/8 of a second handheld, and it is sharp. I've blown this up. Again, I've done a 20 by 30 of this, and it holds up very, very well. Iceland image on the coast. That strong graphic light. This is back in Two Harbors. The atmosphere and the light here, I think, really carry this image. And another one from Iceland. It's a waterfall down in Mexico. And a West Coast shot from Oregon. So another area I look at is content, of course. What am I taking a photograph of? And does that content lend itself well to a black and white interpretation? And I do think that there's certain content that works really well with black and white conversions. Old stuff, you know, photographers love to photograph old stuff. The workshop that I do in North Dakota, where we go around and photograph all these old abandoned farms, that workshop's packed every single year. People love it because, you know, I don't know what it is, but we photographers, we love taking pictures of old things. And this is it's a partly, this dock did extend all the way to the shore at one time. It's an ore dock on Lake Superior, but they tore off part of it, and this is what is left sitting out in the lake. And this content lent itself well to the black and white treatment. A flying buttress. This is on a church down in Cuernavaca, Mexico. another 1500s church, 16th century church in Mexico. And a roadway in Iceland. And then a landscape scene down here in Utah. Texture, you know, in this case, these these are, I live in an area that's called Cedar Mesa in the Four Corners area. And these are actually not cedar trees. There are no cedar trees in North America. All the cedar trees are over in the Middle East. We have junipers here, but I guess Juniper Mesa just doesn't roll off the tongue the same way. So it's called Cedar Mesa, but they have wonderful texture. So seeing in shades of gray, what I did was I took this image. This is the base image that we're going to take a look at. And then I'm just going to do a real quick run through in terms of looking at that image and assessing it as a black and white in shades of gray. So this is the histogram from the image that you're looking at. And then you'll see that the grayscale over on the right side of the screen, and the dark areas represent the darkest area there. This is sort of the same thinking that Ansel Adams used with his zone system. And I have applied this way of thinking as I think about image making and print making with the digital, in the digital medium in the same way. And that represents this area of the histogram. And you'll see in just a minute why that's important to keep this in mind. These areas are a little bit lighter. They're a notch up on the grayscale, and it represents this area in the histogram. You go to the middle gray areas, the zone 5 areas, as Ansel would refer to them, and that's the midtones on the histogram. The brighter areas, which still have a fair amount of detail in them, are in the midtone highlight areas, and that's this area of the histogram. And then the brightest areas are in the highlight areas on this part of the histogram. I work in camera raw for all of my work with black and white, and that is really important, I think, to get good quality, high quality black and whites, because just like with film, we're using some of the same principles with digital, ironically, as what you used to with film. With film, when we wanted to really expand the dynamic range of the film, we would expose for the shadows and develop the film for the highlights, meaning that we would overexpose the film, but then underdevelop it in the development, so that you would get more shadow detail. Very similar in the digital realm. In order for this to work, you have to be working in RAW, the RAW mode. You can't work in JPEG. And the difference is, in JPEG you capture in 8-bit, in RAW you capture in 16-bit. So what does that mean? RAW, you know, the different bit depths. RAW is actually a 14-bit capture, and your print prints out in 8-bit. So your camera and your display will display in 14-bit. Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop calls it 16-bit. It's really 14-bit because most DSLRs or mirrorless are only capturing in 14-bit, not true 16-bit. So if you look at that and you look at the differences between them, in 8-bit you have 256 tonal values. And we go back to those slides that showed you what the tonal values were and where they related in the histogram. What that means is there's 256 distinct tones, from the deepest, darkest black to the palest white, when you're working in 8-bit, and that's what you print out in. or that's what JPEG captures in. In 14-bit, your camera captures 16,384 tonal values. Where that becomes especially important is the way that it's divided up. In 8-bit, the brightest fifth has 128 tonal values. In 16-bit, you've got 8,000 and change. In the highlight midtones, you have 64 tonal values in 8-bit, 4,000 tonal values in 14-bit. In the midtones, you have 32 tonal values, and in 14-bit, 2,000 and change. In the shadow midtones, you're down to 16 total values, and in 14-bit, you've got 1,000. And in the shadow areas, you in 8-bit, you only have 8 tonal values that you're working with. So if you're capturing in JPEG and you're trying to do black and whites, you're really limiting what the number of tonal values that you have and what you're able to reproduce. And that's why you might be getting some blotchy tones, particularly in the shadow and darker areas of the image, if you're capturing 8-bit. If you're capturing 14-bit, you have a lot more tonal values to work with, and you're not as apt to have those problems. You still may have some, especially when you go out to print, because you've got to remember, print devices all work in 8-bit essentially. So you're converting from a 14-bit down to an 8-bit. But it's better to have that greater amount of information that you're putting into the printer, so you have a higher quality print that comes out. All right. So one of the things that you can do in post-process with digital is you can process for what's called a grain effect, and it's in the effects area of your raw processor, whether you're using Lightroom or whether you're using Camera Raw. You go into the raw, into the effects, and you will see your grain slider that will determine the amount, size, and roughness of the grain that you can apply to the image. So here's a straight image with no grain that's been applied. We zoom in, and I have applied a small amount of grain, so you can see I've got the amount at 30, the size at 20, and the roughness is at 50. If we increase that significantly, you can start to see a more prominent grain pattern that's in there. Grain is a little different than noise. Noise is basically static. That's what noise is. It's static in the image. And grain is a effect that they wrote in as an algorithm to give it a little bit more of a random organic look to it that harkens back to the film days. So this treatment would be something more like a high-speed film, like Tri-X, or maybe even Tri-X pushed. The previous one that I showed you, this one is probably something more akin to a plus X or something like a slower speed film with finer grain structure to it. This slide right here, I'm gonna just move you guys a second so I can see this right side. This shows sort of how I approach my processing. Now, I process probably a little differently than a lot of other people. I don't use Lightroom. I use Bridge, Photoshop, and then the Camera Raw, Adobe Camera Raw converter. That's what I've gotten used to. I like it, and I've just stuck with it rather than going to Lightroom. I stick with the little more conventional process. But I run through my processing here, and I change the black and white to a black and white right at the very beginning. And then you'll see I make some slight adjustments as I go. I don't hesitate to use the highlight and the shadow slider at full 100% if I need to increase the dynamic range. I add some blacks into it. As you see here, I'm adding some black, which is a negative number. Adding black is a negative. So I'm bringing some more black in, particularly when I open the shadows, which I've done with this image. I've opened the shadows a lot So I'm adding some blacks in to give it some punch back down in the baseline. You'll notice that my exposure, I was pretty good with my exposure. I brought it down just a little bit. I tend to ride the exposure over to the right side. I'm riding it up on that right side because raw processors prefer overexposure. They can grab information that is over and bring it back into a usable realm, as opposed to JPEG that doesn't like overexposure, because if you blow out your highlights, they're gone. But with RAW, you have room where you can bring that back in. This is actually a little older version here of the processor, so we don't have the latest slider in the bottom there, which is texture. I have found that I've been using texture a little bit more than what I do with clarity, and then dehaze. I typically add a little dehaze in there to most images for landscape work. These sliders, I don't, what would now be a texture, clarity, and dehaze, I don't go too hog wild with. I keep those as pretty minimal as far as my changes go. Let's see if I'm, why am I there? All right. I also sharpen in my camera raw converter, so I bring it through the sharpen and make my changes in the sharpening there, and that's where I sharpen my image. I sharpen it on the input. I do some minimal sharpening once it's in Photoshop. I bring it into Photoshop for all my finishing work. So when I am doing my finishing touches to the image, it comes into Photoshop, and the primary tool that I use is a process called the history brush. That's how I do all my burning and dodging. It is the best thing since sliced bread as far as I'm concerned. It's been around forever. I think it was on Photoshop 2.0, the very original, and I go back to about Photoshop 2.0, and it's a great tool. If you go to my website, coldsnapphotography.com, there is a whole step-by-step tutorial in the blog area on how to use the history brush. I don't have time to go into it tonight, and it usually takes me about 3 or 4 times before people kind of get the hang of it. But it's a great tool for burning and dodging. It does a much better job than the burn and dodge tool. I print both. I've used both Epson as well as Canon printers. In this particular case, I'm just showing that on the printer settings, I let Photoshop manage color. I put the proper printer profile in. I use Moab papers a lot. So this has the Moab LaSalle matte for that particular printer in there. And I send it to the printer. When I send it to the printer, I don't size the image and resample it before I send it. I'm sending all the pixels to the printer, and I just determine the document size. So I let the pixel count, the pixels per inch, I don't care whether it's, you know, it can be 300 or it can be 600. It doesn't matter to me because the printer is determining the best use of the data. So I send the whole thing to it. And this is the Canon, this shows the Canon interface. I like the Canon interface for the printer better than the Epson. I think I like the layout of it a little bit better. The Print Studio Pro, although I'm waiting now to be able to get back to using that, because when I upgraded my Mac, they didn't have the Print Studio Pro ready, and the last time I tried to use it, it wasn't ready for the new Mac operating system yet. So here's a review of my workflow. We have the camera capture. I'm exposing for shadows, which means I'm giving a good, healthy exposure. I'm working in RAW format. I import it into Bridge or Lightroom. I process for the highlights and the shadows, bringing it down in exposure to bring the values back into where I need them. I add the grain effect, I export to Photoshop. I do that in ProPhoto RGB. So I will convert it. When you convert it to a grayscale, I convert it to the ProPhoto because I like that color space because I can add some tones to it quite easily using the curves dialog box in Photoshop. I do my burning and dodging and fine retouching if there's any little retouching or fixes that need to be done in it in Photoshop, and then I print from Photoshop. And I think that's it. Yep, that's the print presentation. Yeah, I'm gonna skip over this part. I'm gonna open it for questions. I do all my own printing and my own framing, and so I do that. And there's information on my website. If you go to coldsnapphotography.com in the blog area, you'll see some information on how to decal prints and how to float mount prints, and that talks about my print presentation. Any questions?
I have one, John. Print Studio Pro, who makes that?
That is a Canon. So if you have a Canon printer, your Canon printer, you go to the Canon website and you can download Canon's Print Studio Pro. It's the interface for their printers.
Okay.
I print with a Canon Pro 1000 for a lot of my work. I like the 17-inch printers, whether you do Epson or Canon. I think the Canon is a little better quality. I think it's got a little better build quality to it, but I own both and use both regularly. My larger prints are done on Epson because that's the printer I have is a larger Epson. If I had to buy it again, I would get a Canon printer, not the Epson printer for my larger stuff, but I have the Epson, so that's what I use. The problem with the 13-inch printers, and Canon now has a mid-size one, but the problem with those smaller printers are that their ink wells are so small, and you're paying a lot per milliliter on ink. Where if you go to the 17-inch size printers, your cost per milliliter drops to about 75 cents a milliliter, as opposed, they don't tell you how many milliliters are in those little tiny cartridges that they sell you for about 18 bucks. And I think there's only about 3 milliliters in there. So you're paying quite a bit per milliliter on the smaller printers. You go to the larger printers, just the 17-inch, you save the difference in the cost of the printer right out of the box because of the difference in the ink costs. I'll also give it one other little tip that I found in printing my black and white. I use a burrata finish. I use the Moab paper, which makes their burrata finish is called Juniper, and there's a number of different burrata finishes. All the different paper manufacturers have a burrata fine art finish. That finish is it's considered a luster or a semi-gloss finish. It's got a little bit of a sheen to it, so it harkens back to the old black and white days when we used to use glossy paper, the old Coda bromide papers, the F surface paper, which was the glossy, but instead of heat drying it, if you air dried it, it gave it sort of a luster look, not a gloss look. And these burrata finishes, they're very similar. They mimic that look. And what the manufacturers recommend on those burrata finishes is that you use the photo black for the printer. The photo black, so you have two blacks in these printers, a matte black and a photo black, and the photo black tends to be not as deep a black. It's not as rich a black, but it's the black that they recommend for luster papers and gloss papers. With the burrata finish, what I've discovered is I tell the printer that to use the matte black. I tell it that it's a matte surface paper. I still use the color profile of the regular paper, but I tell for the print setup, I tell it to use the matte black. and you get these really nice, deep, rich blacks on that luster paper that look great. Now, the drawback is that the reason they don't want that matte black, because it's a heavier black, is it sits on the surface of the paper more. It doesn't soak into the fibers of the paper. So if you take your thumb and you rub on the surface of that paper, yeah, you can end up with a little black smudge on your thumb. But if you're like me, what you're doing is you're framing that print, you're putting it behind glass where nobody's going to be rubbing their thumb on it. So it's not an issue. And you just need to make sure that you don't, scuff it while it's still wet, which if it sets up for a day, it's definitely pretty hard to get a smudge off of it after it's dried for a day.
You're freezing up on us, John.
Uh-oh.
I know. Are we losing John? He's drinking coffee, but he hasn't stopped, so he's frozen in motion. Okay, you're coming back.
All right, just as I'm picking my teeth, huh?
Yep, yep. You were stuck in coffee mode, and then you came back. Is there any other questions that people have for John? And I was told if some people click out of live video, that will also make that not happen as much. So people can turn their live video off at least for a few minutes, then that'll help a lot. I got from John Quinby, I got a message, very nice images and presentation.
Thank you.
I agree. Thank you at the last minute. Do you want to spend a few minutes just talking about digital or mirrorless cameras?
Sure. So I switched to Fuji about 4 years ago and converted from Canon. I was shooting a Canon 5D Mark III. I switched to the Fuji X-T2 and now I have X-T3s. I haven't upgraded to the X-T4. I'm not sure if I'm going to. I'm sort of looking at it and judging it. I'm not quite sure. I like the X-T3 a lot. The X-T4 has the more image stabilization in body. I'm a big believer in mirrorless cameras for a variety of different things. I've been shooting a lot of birds lately, and bird photography, the mirrorless has some amazing features. If you go with any of the smaller size ones, the Panasonic, the Olympus, or the Fuji, they have a feature that's called the sports pre-shot. So you're shooting birds, you got a long lens, you're zoomed in on a bird sitting on a branch, and you're waiting for that bird to do something, like fly away so you can get a flight shot or something, and it flies and you hit the button and you get maybe some tail feathers in the corner of the frame, right? How many times does that happen to folks? I know it's happened to me quite a bit. So you flip on the sports pre-shot and it works when the camera's in high performance mode. You set it at about 20 frames a second, and you are camped out on that bird sitting on the branch, and you push your shutter button down halfway. The camera starts buffering shots. That bird flies, you press the button down all the way, and it saves the previous up to, with the Olympus, up to about 30 shots. So that means you never miss a shot, because you will always have that bird captured, even though the action took place after you actually press the shutter button down all the way. I was just down near Tucson photographing Ron Nyberger. He's from Alaska, runs workshops up there. I'm sure many of you might be familiar with him. He runs a place down near Tucson where he does bird blinds, and has some beautiful bird blinds set up down there. If you want to go and photograph some wonderful birds, it's a great place to do it. Ron's a great guy, and he runs a first-class operation down there. And I just had a blast shooting the birds down there. I was able to kind of sit back and watch on live view as the birds came and went. And when action happened, I just hit that button and captured it. So that's one of the features of mirrorless that works really, really well. The other thing I like with, again, with, I mean, Canon with their R5 that just came out, that's an excellent camera, and it does a lot of things in it, and it works really well for, especially when you're doing wildlife and birds. But my my preference is actually with the Fuji system, and the cost is less. That's one of the things I really like about the Fuji system. I'm paying about 65 cents on the dollar for equivalent stuff that is either Canon, Nikon, or Sony, or half. It's about half. Sony's the most expensive. I'm paying about half of what Sony is and about 2/3 of what Nikon and Canon run for equivalent stuff. And I'll put my images and the image quality up against those full frames any day.
So any questions about mirrorless cameras for John? Thank you. That was good information. I'm kind of on the fence there trying to decide what I want to do. That was good information. And cost. Does anybody have any questions for John? I do have some comments that people have made. What a great surprise we had tonight. Thanks for the presentation. Love the images by Gail. Alan Musey, very good presentation. You heard the ones from, so if anybody has anything else that they'd like to say, I just super appreciate it. The last minute you you showed up. And Marion Owens has a question. What was the model camera that you use?
For the Fuji, I'm using XT3 these days. I'm shooting the XT3 body.
Okay, I just typed it in the messages, Fuji XP3, if somebody needs to write that.
T as in Tom.
Oh, XT, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Fuji XT3.
3.
XT3. Okay, great. And Marianne Owens also says thanks. And Amber Johnson also said, what a great presentation. So there you have it. Oh, I have one hand up. I have one hand up. Janelle?
What are the lenses for the Fuji, the mirrorless? Are they lightweight or too, or do you know?
So yep. So I did this spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet that I did took the major brands. I looked at Sony, I looked at Nikon, Canon, Fuji, Olympus, and Panasonic. And I took 4 lenses, as I think I mentioned, as 16 to 35, 24 to 70, 70 to 200, and 100 400, or equivalent, because when you get into the smaller formats, the focal length is just a little bit different. And I looked at cost and weight. Now, I originally did this spreadsheet before Canon and Nikon really came out with their mirrorless cameras. So this goes back just a few years, but it's still pretty similar. In fact, the weight might be a little bit more, because with a lot of the, with both Nikon and Canon, because they haven't really switched over their glass to mirrorless, they're starting to come out with more and more mirrorless lenses, but on a lot of it, you still have to have the adapter. And the way it worked out was that that Sony was the most expensive at about $12,000 for their setup. Nikon was around 11. Canon was close to 11 at like 10.8. And then Olympus was in there at about 8,500, primarily because of one lens that was really expensive. And then Fuji was about 7,500, and Panasonic was 5,000. And then weight-wise, if you look at it with each of those ones, the weight-wise was about the same per pound. So you paid about $1,000 a pound. So with the only flip was that the Sony was slightly lighter at about 10 pounds and change, but Canon was the most expensive at around 11 pounds. Nikon was about 10 pounds. Olympus was around 8 to 8.5 pounds because of primarily that one lens that was so expensive. And Fuji was 7,500 and Panasonic was 5,000. So you pay about $1,000 a pound. And that's where the weight also worked out.
Do you find the quality was better by price?
Yeah, so quality is it's a relative term as far as how that translates. So there's some things that quality wise that are hands down better with those smaller formats because the larger formats don't do them, like the sports pre-shot. Now maybe it's coming out in some of the later releases. If Canon continues on the bend that they are with that R5, which is an amazing camera, amazingly good camera. It's one that has put them on the map for the mirrorless. It's not cheap, but it's a really, really good camera. It does not have the sports pre-shot at this time. So where that relates to quality is if you don't get the shot, you got no quality. Where you're going to get the shot with the Fuji or the Olympus or the Panasonic. And the quality, once you capture it, is still very, very good. What are you doing with your images? When was the last time you made a 30 by 40 size print? Most of us primarily are posting online. Well, if you have 1,800 pixels, you got a good image, and certainly the dynamic range. I'll tell you what, the one thing that really has I work with a Sony. So I have a Sony and I use a Sony and I use it for landscape. I have it on this weird setup, which is called a Cambo, which is a bellows. And I shoot landscape with it. It's kind of this exotic thing. And I love it because, again, I like to fiddle with stuff out in the field. And this allows me to fiddle with stuff out in the field. So I shot a shot with my handheld pocket Fuji camera, the X70. Went out, I shot this landscape scene, and it was a corral in the foreground and an old dead cottonwood there in this valley that's not far from me. Beautiful little valley up here. And I posted it online. Well, immediately, one of my friends who's he's been a magazine photographer for years, and he's on that thing, and he's, John, this is great. This would look big. You got to make this print huge. I'm like, yeah, well, I shot it with my pocket camera, So I went back out the next, like a couple days later with my Sony to shoot the same thing. When I shot it with the pocket camera, I didn't have any filters. I was just a straight shot and then manipulated it post-process. And I had no issues with the dynamic range. The shot was shot late in the day when the sun was hitting the far bluffs on the other side of the valley. And I went back at the same time of the day. I put every filter I had on in my kit to filter down the highlights, and the dynamic range was still much greater than what that Fuji was. The Fuji beat the Sony as far as the dynamic range. So, quality, it can be relative, but that's my experience.
And I'll add the lenses that I have for the Fuji are equivalent to the L series lenses for Canon. They're super sharp, really wonderful, lightweight lenses to work with.
The Fuji wide angle at 10 to 24. Nikon and Canon wish they could make a wide angle as sharp as that lens. And if you go to a website, they changed their name. They used to be called slrgear.com. And if you go to slrgear.com, it still advances you to the new website. Go to that website and look at the bench tests of the Fuji 10 to 24. And put that against any of the equivalent, which would be a 1635 from any of the other manufacturers. It's a great lens, very sharp.
Can you repeat that website again, please?
Sure. SLR, just like the camera, slrgear.com. I think the new one is something like imaging-resources or imaging-resource, but I never get it right. So I always just go to slrgear.com and it gets me, it rolls me over to the new one. That website's very addictive, by the way, for looking at different quality of lenses.
Any other questions for John?
All right.
Thank you so much for filling in. We really appreciate
No
it.
problem. You bet.
Great
Happy to
surprise.
do it. Take care. Hope to get up there someday. I've never been to Alaska. It's one of the places I want to go.
Well, come up and let us host you.
Sounds great. Let's
Yes,
stay in touch.
we're a good group. Lots of thank yous, lots of great presentations.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you
Yeah,
again, John.
Thanks again, John. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
People could stick around. I forgot one important piece of business. We need to do board elections.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Margaret. So go ahead, take it away.
Okay, so it's our every other year elections. It's supposed to be before the January of the odd numbered years. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people returning and 2 new people want to get onto the board. I'm gonna do this the same way we usually would at the museum. If everybody could unmute themselves, it's just gonna be I'm gonna read out the names, say, does everybody approve? And you can say yes, and I'll say, does anybody not approve? And you can respond to that if you like, and that's how we're gonna do the elections this year. So if you could unmute yourselves for a minute, and then I will read through the names. Go ahead, I'll be quiet. So returning members, Kathy Hart, Margaret Gaines, Alan Musi, Glenn Aaronwitz, Roxanne Peter, Joan Nunn, Carl Johnson, Amber Johnson, Rick Job, and Gail Neufeld. And then 2 people have stepped up to join us, Jen Corbell and Doug Hupp. I just need all in favor of these people being on the board, please say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Anybody opposed?
Never.
Okay, so this is our board for the next 2 years. Thank you, everybody. And I will post those names in the newsletter on Friday. And Jen Corbell and Gail Neufeld are actually taking over Alaska Wild for me. They're going to be a tag team working on that, and I'll be the backup and information person. So you'll be seeing their names a lot more in the near future. So thank you. We do have some member slides. Alan, are you ready with those? And after that, we will be done.
And that I just wanted to take a minute and thank John DeLapp and Julie Jessen for all of the time and energy that they've put into this organization. I think, John, you've been on the board as long as I have, if not longer. And I really appreciate all the work and time and energy. And John will continue to have his Dear John, even though it's in a different format. And Julie's been helping out a lot over the years as president, as programs chair. So I just wanted to take the time to thank both of them very much for all their time and energy.
Well, thank you for introducing me to the club years and years ago.
Did I do that?
Yeah, you did.
I'll be darned.
One of those classes at UAA years ago.
Wow.
Okay, are you seeing a screen?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we
Okay,
can see the picture now.
good deal. All right. So David, you're up first. Are you still with us, David?
Yes.
I am.
All right.
It's my first time I've ever posted a picture with a group before.
Yeah, you basically you mentioned, talk a little bit about your photo and then tell me next so I can advance the slide.
It was stuff that we were sending to my grandson. I don't remember what it was taken within S20. But that's all I really know. I really can say. So next. It was taken with a Sony Alpha 57, I believe. It's right outside the house, right next to the Westchester Lagoons.
Cool.
And it was just like 2 weeks ago. Next.
Yep.
I don't think there's anything else.
And Laura,
It's
you're
not
up.
on.
Yeah, this was taken early April where we were still under quarantine. I just had to get out of town. So we drove up north toward the Matanuska Glacier and ended up stopping and taking this because I just liked the view. Next. This was, I'm sorry.
Nice.
Yep, lots of ice over Cook Inlet and the sunset. Lots of mountains in the background. Next.
Read out.
Yeah, that is Redoubt. And this was when the road to Teklanika first opened up early spring. We drove out and then walked out the road a little bit past Teklanika. And this is just kind of looking back down the Tech River Valley. Just, you know, pretty spring day. Lots of fun to go out for a walk. Next. The obligatory Arctic turns at Potter Valley. Got to do them.
He's landing on it. He's landing on his beak instead of his feet.
I know. I love that picture. It's just, it was one of those, oh my gosh, I can't believe I caught that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Nosedive.
Yep. And this was Resurrection Bay, one of the otters just enjoying lunch out there. We sat there and watched him for quite a while. Totally ignored us. So.
Very nice.
Once they're eating, they pretty much ignore everybody.
Oh yeah. Next. And this is also out Resurrection Bay. It's out by Cape Resurrection. The nanny goat and kid came down almost to the water line. And so we got to sit there and watch them for about half an hour from the boat, just enjoying watching them eat what little bit of green they could find. And I guess they were also licking the salt from the rocks, from what I understand, which is just kind of a cool experience to see them. Next. Oh yeah, end of summer's coming. I always got to get one fireweed shot every year. Next. This was early August. We drove across the Denali Highway and you could see the storms coming in across the tundra. I just love the light. I was trying to capture the light on these.
That's a great image. Good contrast.
Yeah. It was really, you know, it's a challenge to get the light with that much going on, but some of them came out well. Some of them I went, delete.
Yeah.
This Denali Road Lottery, these guys, there's actually two of them right by the road. We get to sit there and watch them. Anybody who's done the road lottery kind of gets to have fun with the bears, but it was a lot of fun to watch these two. I'm not sure if they were two cubs that had just left or it was a mother and adult cub that was going to leave, but they're about the same size. So I'm thinking they may have been twins that had just gotten kicked out. Next. I think this is the last one, but this is also the road lottery, just looking at the snow on the mountains as we were going up through some of the passes.
Yep. This was the last image.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Great. Those are great.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing the images. John and Julie, again, thank you for being on the board. Enjoy your time off. We look forward to seeing you at the meetings, and thank you everybody for coming. We'll see you next month when we've got Marion talking about snowflakes and macro photography.
Yeah,
Y'all have a very Merry Christmas to all of you.
Marion, did you want to make a plug for that? Or no? It's up to you. Okay, she says no.
Merry Christmas to everybody, though.
Yep.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Margaret, I hope your surgery goes well.
Thank you, me too.
Likewise.
Wish it
Yeah.
would get here.
Well, I'll be sending you positive thoughts and a quick recovery, because I like it better when I just watch the meetings instead of having to run them.
You'll be a pro by the time she recovers there.
I know,
Kathy.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I'm
You're
learning all
great.
kinds of new things.
You're
As you
doing
can
great.
see, I still have difficulty, and I've been working with these meetings for a while, but I still have some technical glitches now and then too. So
Good to see your face, Lynn.
Yeah, nice to see you, Kathy.
I
Thanks
miss
a
it.
lot for everything you guys do.
you're
Yeah, it's-
welcome.
Yeah, this is working out good. We get to see people that we don't
you-
normally see, like
Are you
Mary
still in
Ellen.
Colorado there, Lynn?
Yeah, I am, and it was wonderful to see those nice sunny Utah images tonight too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bluff is a pretty area to live in. Yeah. So.
All right.
Okay.
Well, everybody have a good evening.
Merry
All
Merry
right. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Don't
Merry
hang
Christmas.
up.
Holidays,
Christmas,
stay
everyone.
safe.
Thanks for your work, Alan.
We'll see you guys after the new year, and hopefully with new and wonderful things and nice backdrop, Marion.
Yeah, I like
I'm
it too.
so excited to learn
I
how
think
to
she's
do
got the
that.
best one of all of us.
Yeah, there you go.
There's actually a story about this particular snowflake, so I'll be sharing that story.
All
Oh,
right.
wonderful.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Bye, you guys.
Okay.
Merry Christmas.
All right.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
Merry
everyone.
Christmas, everyone.
Bye now.